All right, what's going on, everybody? So, in the meantime, while we wait for more videos on the dresser build, which they're coming, making a lot of progress with milling that wood, I thought we'd do something a little different, a little interesting for the channel. I'm going to go ahead and recommend to you the 10 products that I find are not super commonplace in everybody's wood shop, that I find super helpful, that I'm using pretty frequently, and that have made a difference in the work that I'm able to do, making things easier, more efficient, etc. So these are not like you have to have them to be a good woodworker, nor are they the tools that you need to be a good woodworker, right? They're not your basic tools, the tools that you definitely need to get into some woodwork. If you'd like to see a video like that, let me know. I'd love to make one, and I might in the future, but today we're just going to go through some of the products that you can see laid out here that I think are essential for increasing efficiency and productivity in your shop. Let's get started. All right, so I've decided that I'm going to go from kind of most or least not as useful to the definite things that I would have to have. So the first 5 might be kind of like, hey, they're nice to have, but not necessary. And then we'll get into what you really need. So number 10, we're talking about a multimeter. Now that's pretty weird, right? You're thinking, we're talking about woodworking. Why does he have a multimeter in your hand? And honestly, when I started thinking about making this video, this was not going to be in it. But the reason I have it in here is you work a lot with power tools, right? If you're a woodworker, unless you're one of those super serious dudes that's doing everything by hand with all hand tools, you probably got a lot of power tools like your table saws, your joiner, your planer, etc. Things that are running off of 120 volt or higher power, air compressors, things like that. And sometimes they break, and I'm saying that because I spent about an hour and a half today fiddling with my planer after it decided to break on me, and I had to check 3 things: the safety switch, the circuit breaker, and the start switch itself for power to make sure those weren't the issues. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without a dedicated tool to do it, like a multimeter. So I recommend you pick one of these up. You can get them at your local hardware store or an auto shop, things like that. They're real cheap, and honestly, it'll probably sit in your shop for a long time before ever being touched. But when you need it to know if power's your issue, they're really good to have. So number 10, a multimeter. All right, coming in at number 9, another little bit of a strange one, but something that I still find super useful is a really good set of sockets, and really a couple good sets of sockets. So I've got one set here made by Pittsburgh, pretty easy to find and pick up, and another set here that's like just a generic name or non-name brand one in both metric and US sizes, right? When you're talking about inches or millimeters, all different kinds of sizes from 3/4, 1/4, and 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8, but either way, you've got your deep sockets, your shallow sockets. They're just really good to have around the shop, right? How many times are you putting something together and you have lag bolts or blanket on the word, nuts and bolts in general that you need a socket for? And so these are just really helpful. You can even get like screwdriver attachments or dedicated hex drivers, things like that. And I'll pan over to my other drawers where I've got even more. And then to go along with that set of socket wrenches, I definitely recommend a good set of just normal standard wrenches, which you'll see in my drawers back here in a second. But super useful, something that I'm using pretty often, something that I'll kind of take out, right? I'll realize I need a 1/4 inch socket and I'll just leave it around the shop while I'm working on a project, and it's one of my go-to tools. So number 9 right here, socket wrenches and wrenches. All right, coming in at number 8 is the Kreg Circular Saw Edge Guide, right? Craig's not the only one that makes these, but it's the one that I purchased. And I purchased it really before I had a nice enough table saw to rip big pieces of plywood on. But even still today, now that I do have that job site table saw, if I'm ripping like a 4x8 sheet of plywood or really anything bigger than the width of the table saw itself, and it's not that wide, I'm going to go ahead and use either a straight edge clamp or a straight edge guide like this, right? They're super useful to have around the shop. Pretty easy to hook up. I'll show you that now. Grab my table saw here, or sorry, my circular saw, and all you do is place the saw along the guide here, and it's not going to want to sit real pretty because obviously I don't have it, or I have it on a flat surface, but you set it in there, set these set screws to keep your saw straight against the fence here, and then you can adjust it all the way out to 24 inches, so 2 feet of cutting width. And this rides along your straight edge of the piece, right, the side, and it'll allow you to make those straight cuts. Really good for ripping things down. And again, if you don't have a table saw maybe, or a long enough straight edge clamp, these make really good substitutes, and it's what I had, like I said, before I had a table saw. So something that's super helpful, kind of inexpensive or not very expensive, and would recommend having the Craig Edge Guide for your circular saw. All right, coming in at number 7 is an air compressor, right? Again, not the most common thing to see in a wood shop, but it could be, and it could be a super versatile tool for you, sort of like the table saw, because an air compressor allows you to do so many things with so many different types of tools. So most of the tools that we're probably all familiar with either run off 120 volt AC power or your standard battery pack, depending on what brand you're using, right? DeWalt, Milwaukee, Ryobi, etc. Now, what most people don't know about or haven't seen or don't see in everyday use are pneumatic tools, right? Tools that run off of an air compressor, like your brad nailers or sanders, right? So the sander that I use is your pretty standard plug-in 120 volt orbital sander, but you can get sanders that are pneumatic, and that's really great because it's a constant source, just like the plug-in of sanding, because it's running off of air. Your brad nailers can run off of them too. You got all kinds of things like blowers just to blow off work pieces, tabletops, things like that as you're using them. Your pretty standard stuff that you've seen them use before, like at a gas station, right, to fill up tires, things like that, all kinds of different parts here for that. You can get all kinds of different types of hoses in different lengths, but they're really helpful. And then, like I said, this is just a super simple 2-in-1 brad nailer or finish nailer that I picked up from Harbor Freight. They're a lot cheaper than your kind of big box store electric brad nailers that you'll put batteries in to use, and they're a lot lighter. That's the great thing about them. Those big brad nailers that you pick up at a big box store that run off a battery, they get really heavy depending on what kind of battery you're putting on it or what the brand is, right? The more expensive ones are smaller because it's harder to create something in that compact of a size. But with an air compressor, this sits on the ground, right? It's either portable like mine or permanently affixed to your shop, and you just get a long enough hose to run it around. But they're real simple to use. You've got your tank pressure gauge here, your regulator pressure gauge there, and you can set the amount of power essentially that you want going to the tool that you're using. And all your tools should tell you what they're rated for, right? Typically between 120 and 80 PSI. And you set that with a regulator, and you've got your 2 ports there to hook up your tools. You can get them pretty cheap, and they're often on sale or on clearance. You don't need one as big as this. They make really tiny ones that you can pick up with pretty much one hand. Don't even need wheels, anything like that. So number 7 is an air compressor. Okay, coming in at number 6 is a dedicated glue container, spreader, whatever you want to call it, right? This is just a glue bot. You can pick them up at your local big box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, you name it, Ace probably. But if you were like me, and when you're kind of just getting into woodworking and you're not using a whole lot of glue, you'll go and buy a couple of, Gorilla Glue, wood glue, maybe a small thing of Type-On 2. You saw me using that in my last video. Things like that, just kind of stuff to keep on hand for as you need it. But if you get into woodworking seriously, we're using more joinery, less pocket holes and things like that for screws, you're going to get into gluing, and you're going to get into gluing seriously. And so to save some money and stop buying like 5 or 6 of these things at a time, just go ahead and buy a gallon-sized jug of your favorite glue, right? I use Type-On 2, but they have Type-On, Type-On 2, and Type-On 3. Got Gorilla Glue, Elmer's wood glue, all of that good stuff. And then you get a glue bot, which are also pretty cheap. They make them in a smaller size and then this size, and you can just refill it and use it as you need. Makes it really easy for spreading, and then you kind of never run out of glue because you got a lot on hand. So I definitely recommend this as my number 6, to have an on-hand dedicated gluing system instead of buying individual bottles like this. These also go bad a lot faster, and so if you've got this on hand, it'll stay and keep a little bit better. All right, coming in at number 5. Right now we're into the top 5. This was really hard to choose between them. They're all pretty close, but if you're a serious woodworker, you're gonna use pocket hole screws at some point, especially if you're getting into cabinetry. That's what pocket holes are most useful for, and then they can be used for other things, right? As you're getting into new types of joinery, you can use your pocket hole screws for all kinds of things. So that's why I recommend a Craig pocket hole jig. Now they make all sorts of types of pocket hole jigs. Mine's a real rudimentary one, probably the cheapest one I could pick up at my big box store when I bought it a couple years ago, and I haven't had to get a new one since, and it's been probably 3 years. So they stand up to time. They're really versatile, really useful, and you can get bigger ones that clamp on your table, things like that if you want to, or into your workpiece itself. But I just went with a simple one, and it's done well so far. It's really good if you get these kits because it'll give you a set of screws. It'll also give you the jig itself, a bit to use with the jig, a bit to drive your pocket hole screws in, and then some accessories for your odds and ends that you can do with pocket holes. Now, pocket hole screws, like I said, extremely useful, extremely versatile. Definitely recommend you having a jig in your shop, even if it's not your primary type of joinery, which is probably a good thing if you're into woodworking and you're doing a lot of different projects. You can use all sorts of joinery, right? Mortise and tenon, dovetail, blanking on all these things, dominoes, biscuits, etc. But pocket holes are always an option, especially if you're doing cabinetry. So recommend a good pocket hole jig that you can pick up and just keep on hand, and they store away really nicely in these little containers. Okay, coming in at number 4, because I think you can never have too many accessories for your table saw. This one's more of a category as well, but it's table saw accessories, right? The table saw is probably the most versatile tool you have in your shop, even opposed to the miter saw or your circular saw. And so you can do a lot with it, especially if you have the right accessories with it. So my DeWalt came with a pretty standard push stick right here, and then a miter slot jig to cut at angles and things like that. Now you can build jigs for your table saw, like cross cut sleds, joinery jigs, all kinds of things like that. But you can also get some things to just help you using. And so the first thing I recommend you buying is a better push block, right? Or you can make one, it seems to be like a rite of passage to make something like this for pushing your pieces through the table saw, or you can just do it the easy way like I did and buy one for 15 bucks from your local big box store. But this is a push stick. It's got a nice little elbow on here so that you can put it on the edge of your piece and push it through, and you're nice and high away from the blade, so it's keeping you safe. Another one right here, this one's really nice. It's got a gripped bottom just like this one here, and then it's got these little feet that kick out, drop down below, you can see it there, and they'll hook onto the edge of your piece too. It's got a guard for your fingers, and pretty often I'll use these together to push and then apply just that little bit of counter pressure against the piece as it slides against the fence. Now, I didn't really love that method because I found that my hand would sometimes move with the piece towards the blade, intentionally, of course, not like it was just going on its own and I wasn't paying attention, but still not my favorite thing. So I got something called a feather board. It's really neat. This right here, this piece slides into your miter slot, and this one came with 2 for different size miter slots. And then you can lock it down, but you can push it closer to your piece or further away from your piece. And you can, get a few of these. You can mount them on the fence, you can mount them on the table itself, and that just allows a little bit of pressure, like I was using this stop block for, to be pressed against the piece as it goes through the table saw, and then, it just helps keep everything in line. So I recommend upgrading from your standard out-of-the-box push stick. This one's kind of flimsy and there's not a lot of surface area to get put against the piece. This one's really nice because it puts some downward pressure on the piece to avoid popping up as it goes through the table saw. So, table saw accessories. Number 4. All right, at number 3 is a solid set of clamps. So this one's more of a category because you can get all sorts of different types of clamps, but clamps in general. Don't cheap out on your clamps. Get good clamps, and you probably want a lot of clamps and clamps for different things. If I haven't said clamps enough, but they make all kinds, right? This is a Craig corner clamp, and so you can use it for cabinetry as you're putting boxes together. Clips right into the corner there and holds it still as you put in your pocket hole screws or whatever sort of joiner that you're using, dovetail, anything like that. This is another set of corner clamps. This is to use to put 2 pieces of wood together. Obviously, that's what all clamps are for. But these are pretty nice. These are my first set of corner clamps. They're DeWalt. And then you can slide your stock in here. And on this side, it makes a nice 90-degree angle to hold it for you. Can accommodate up to 3 inches of wood. So that one's really good. But I needed something for corners of boxes, and so that was where my Craig one came in. And then up here, you'll see all my other clamps. I'm using them right now to glue up a table leg, so I can't really grab them to show you, but you've got your kind of bar clamps, which have feet of their own, and they give you a solid flat surface to lay your piece against as you're gluing it up and clamping it down. And then they can apply a lot of pressure. That's where those come in because it's a pipe clamp system, and so you can put, like mine, for example, these Jorgensen's, up to 1,500 pounds of clamping pressure, and then you've got your standard hand clamps, which I've got there as well. Now, the hand clamps, the really great thing about those is they're cheap. Mine are from Harbor Freight. I've had them for years. I have only had one out of the, let's see, I've got 6 of them, I think, the 6 that have broken in the last 3 years. They're real cheap. You can get them in all different sizes. So I've got like a 12-inch, 24-inch, and a 36-inch. So I recommend having a good clamp system like that. And you can even build a little wall for them to hold them and keep them nice and tidy clamps. All right, coming at number 2, and this was a hard-pressed place for number 1, is a good set of bits and drivers, right? So I've got a majority of my bits and drivers out here, not all of them because I have a lot, and you should too, honestly, right? So you've got your bits right here, all kinds of different drill bits, all kinds of different sizes because you want to pre-hole or pre-drill your holes, right? So that you're not splitting wood as you're drilling into them with wood screws or drywall screws, whatever you're using for. So get yourself a good set of bits. I like DeWalt bits. They make them in these nice cases, and then they're easy to read, easy to store, easy to put back. But you can get any kind of bits. There's all kinds. This is an off-brand one that I got from an estate sale. You can find them there a lot. All kinds of different bits there. Really good and easily stored. This is your kind of standard run-of-the-mill bit set, driver set that you would find in kind of anyone's house, right? Maybe in a junk drawer, things like that. But these are nice, and you can pick them up usually in these sets like this of 4. I'm missing a few, and that's why you want a lot of different sorts of driver sets because you oftentimes lose them. But they got all different types here. They got your hex, your star, your panhead, which is like the square ones, your Phillips, your flatheads, and all kinds of different sizes. So definitely recommend that for interchangeability with your screwdriver, your drill, or your impact driver. I've got some specialty bits here that I pick up, odds and ends, that don't really have a storage point. And then this right here, I can't rave about enough. You've seen me talk about this on my channel once before. I picked this setup for $20. It's just your simple skill, like, I don't know, 120-piece drilling bit and driver set. You've got a couple different types of bits in here, some spade bits, bits, and then you've got all your drivers, right? And they're impact ready, and that's what I loved about them. So an impact bit is a little bit different than a driver bit because you see with your driver, if I can zoom in here, it's kind of a solid shank, right? And the drill will compress on that shank, and that's what holds it in place while you use it. Now, an impact doesn't work that way. It's got a kind of pull and release system, and so you've got to have these slots on the end of your shank here so that it can grip into that with its teeth and hold it in place. So that's why impact bits are different than your typical drill bits. So I got impact ready bits. They work with both a drill and an impact, but you've got all kinds of different types. Same thing as what this system is, except a little bit more length on them, which is always good, and then multiple of the same type in case you lose one. So again, can't talk about these enough. They're really great. You got your standard drill bits right here, impact bits here, drill bits for pre-drilling screws, like I said, spade bits, all kinds of great things in these. This probably cost me maybe $20, $25, or $30, and I would just highly recommend that you pick a set of this up as well for everyday use. I literally use it every day. Okay, and coming in at number 1, guys, the thing that I think you absolutely need in your wood shop if you're a woodworker, whether you're amateur or professional. Now, depending on what you are, amateur or professional, your system might look a little bit different, but my number 1 is a dust collection system. So this is a dust topper. You can find them at Home Depot or on Amazon. I'll link that in the description below, or you can watch the video review and unboxing that I did right below me here. You can click to that link, but I just can't talk about this thing enough. It's phenomenal. It attaches to your shop vac, so it's super versatile. It attaches to all my tools with some fittings that, again, you can see me talk about in the video below. But it works really well for separating dust particles, fine dust particles, large dust particles from my joiner, my planer, etc., keeping them out of my shop vac filter. And that's the most important part about a dust collection system. It keeps them out of your filter to keep that suction steady and constant over the period of a project when you're switching from tool to tool, especially your heavy producing ones like a planer or a joiner. So this is it's great. It's really an inexpensive system. It's versatile. It's good for small shops. And they just came out with the Dust Topper 2.0, literally like 2 weeks after I bought the Dust Topper 1.0, which is a little unfortunate. But it's an even better system. It's got a static discharge line on it because this does build up static, I've noticed. And then it's got a grommet outlining or running along the perimeter here to just create a better seal so there's no wood dust, sawdust, wood dust escaping from it as you use it, which is kind of a problem with the Dust Topper 1.0 here. But this one might be cheaper now, so if you're okay with that, just cannot recommend this enough. So that's my number one, is the Dust Topper system. All right, guys, and that is my video on the 10 things that I find most useful around my shop that are kind of not commonplace, that I think I use regularly and could make a big difference in efficiency and productivity in your shop too. So all of the items that I talked about today will be linked in the description. Feel free to use those links. They'll bring you directly to Amazon. More than likely, they're my affiliate links. It helps to just support the channel in a small way if you do purchase them from my link. So feel free to use those. We'll get more content coming out on the dresser here soon. I'm almost done milling up all the lumber. It's quite the process, as you can imagine. I got done with my rails and stiles for the side panels and then all of the drawer fronts today. I actually have a little bit left on the drawer fronts, and that was what it was over to the right, but not too big of a deal. So getting there, and we'll see more on that soon. This has been 5 o'clock Woodshop, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, please like, subscribe, and comment. The support has been phenomenal. The channel's been growing pretty rapidly, and I really love to see it. So thanks, guys. Check back for more later.